General Hospital spoilers reveal that Willow had always believed that darkness was something that happened to other people, criminals, strangers, unlucky souls whose lives veered in terrible directions. She never imagined it could grow quietly inside someone like her, someone who had been shaped by loss, illness, and desperate attempts to hold a fractured life together. But the truth was that darkness didn't choose its vessel. It simply needed a reason, a crack in the foundation. And Willow had accumulated hundreds of them over the years. What no one realized was that each fracture left behind a trace of bitterness, a shard of silence, and a shadow of fear. Together, those pieces began shaping her new identity, one that she barely understood yet followed with unsettling clarity. Her distance from Wiley and Amelia had changed her in ways even she could not articulate. The empty months, the missed milestones, the fear that her children were learning to live without her, all of it festered beneath her ribs, like a bruise that never healed. When she finally returned, she found their world already shifting, already drifting, already reshaped by the presence of someone who was not her. Jacinda had slipped into the edges of their routines with alarming grace. She knew how to make Wiley laugh. She understood his video games. She knew how to crouch beside him at just the right level, matching his energy and rhythm with an ease Willow could not replicate after months of emotional distance. Jacinda wasn't trying to replace her, but that barely mattered. In Willow's eyes, the replacement was already happening. The moment Willow saw Wiley hug Jacinda with spontaneous warmth, something sharp and cold moved through her, something that made her lungs tighten. It wasn't jealousy. It was terror. Terror that Wiley would reach for Jacinda instead of her. Terror that Amelia would someday call another woman mom. Terror that she would lose the one thing she had fought so hard to keep, even as illness and life itself tried to strip it away. And buried beneath that terror was something far darker, the unshakable belief that she could not afford to lose again. When Willow learned that Michael was still loyal to Jacinda despite the unraveling of their alibi, she felt a crack form deep inside her. It wasn't the kind that healed, it was the kind that widened, allowing something colder to drip through. Michael's loyalty was infuriating. He had always been compassionate, forgiving, determined to see goodness in people even when it blinded him. But to Willow, this wasn't compassion. It was betrayal. He was choosing Jacinda's presence over Willow's place in the children's lives. He was choosing a stranger over the mother of his children. And in Willow's increasingly twisted logic, that meant he was choosing Jacinda over family. Her actions with Drew had already revealed how far she was willing to go when cornered. She had held the syringe without trembling. She had delivered the injection without hesitation. She had watched the effects unfold with clinical detachment, studying every detail to ensure the result matched her expectations. And when Drew collapsed, when his body betrayed him in the way she intended, she felt neither guilt nor relief, only confirmation. Confirmation that she could act decisively. Confirmation that she could create outcomes. Confirmation that she could control what others believed fate had taken from her. That new version of Willow, the one sharpened by fear, fueled by resentment, and guided by cold logic, began observing Jacinda with unnerving precision. She cataloged her patterns, her gestures, her interactions with the children. Every kindness Jacinda offered became a threat. Every smile became an accusation. Every attempt at bonding became an intrusion. Willow began orchestrating subtle disruptions, sowing doubts where she could, planting seeds of suspicion in places Michael wouldn't immediately notice. She spoke softly but strategically, reshaping concerns into questions, letting implications linger long after her words faded. But subtlety was not enough, not for what Willow feared most. She could feel time slipping away. Like sand sliding through an hourglass she could no longer flip over. Jacinda was becoming too comfortable in Michael's home, too present in Wiley's world, too familiar in Amelia's routine. And worst of all, Michael seemed open to the idea of a future with her, a future that might evolve into something permanent, something like marriage, something that would give Jacinda an official title Willow could never accept. It was in the quiet moments late at night, alone with her thoughts, when Willow's mind wandered into territories she had once considered unthinkable. She began imagining ways Jacinda could disappear from the picture. She studied allergic reactions, sudden collapses, unexplained medical events. She combed through medical knowledge with the same precision she had used when preparing to neutralize Drew. Every detail became a possible scenario. Every possibility became a potential path, and with each passing day, the boundaries of morality blurred further. Crumbling beneath the weight of her desperation, Willow convinced herself that she wasn't being malicious, she was being protective. She was safeguarding her children, preserving their connection, ensuring her rightful place was not stolen. She told herself that Jacinda would eventually hurt them, that her past, her career, her choices made her unstable, unreliable, unworthy of influencing the Corinthos family. She transformed Jacinda in her mind into a threat so large that its removal felt like a duty, rather than a crime. The more Willow twisted the narrative, the more justified she felt. She began crafting a plan that felt strangely familiar, echoing the methodical precision she used with Drew. It would require patience, timing, and absolute composure, and Willow possessed all three. She could smile in front of Michael while assessing where Jacinda kept her drinks. She could speak softly to Wiley while noticing which medications Jacinda carried. For her mild seasonal allergies, she could offer kindness while memorizing vulnerabilities. Each observation became a piece of a blueprint no one else could see forming. What made the transformation even more chilling was Willow's calmness. The darkness consuming her wasn't frantic or chaotic, it was deliberate. It moved like a slow tide, steady and inevitable. She did not rage, she did not panic. She simply evaluated and adjusted, the way a surgeon studies an X-ray before making the first incision. Her mind had shifted into a place where removing Jacinda felt not only possible but necessary. In fact, she believed it was the only way to restore balance, to reclaim the life and the family she believed she was losing. Jacinda continued living her days unaware that Willow had redrawn her role. From inconvenience to obstacle, from obstacle to danger, and from danger to target. Each smile Jacinda gave Wiley tightened Willow's resolve. Each affectionate gesture toward Michael solidified her intention. Willow no longer saw Jacinda as a person with a life, a past, or a future. She saw her as a problem, and problems, in Willow's mind, were meant to be solved. The darkest truth of all was that Willow no longer questioned the morality of what she was planning. She only questioned the timing. Something inside her whispered that action was inevitable, that fate had already begun shaping the outcome. And in that whisper, Willow found her final justification. If she didn't act now, she could lose everything forever. The line she once swore she would never cross was already behind her. The only question left was how far she would go now that nothing remained to stop her. Willow had always believed she understood the limits of her own morality, the invisible line she would never cross. Yet as the days stretched on and Jacinda's presence grew heavier in Michael's life, Willow found herself drifting toward a version of herself she barely recognized. It began quietly, with the precision of someone who had been forced to adapt too many times in her life. She told herself she wasn't truly doing anything wrong, she was merely correcting an imbalance, adjusting a situation that had slipped dangerously out of control. But that small justification, repeated often enough, became the foundation for a darker evolution. Her first strategy was simple: dismantle Michael and Jacinda's relationship from the inside out. She knew Michael's emotional patterns better than anyone. She knew how deeply he valued trust and how quickly disappointment could harden into disillusionment. Willow began planting gentle doubts, small seeds that could take root if nurtured correctly. A comment about Jacinda's past, phrased as concern. A subtle question about Jacinda's intentions, spoken as curiosity. A remark about how Jacinda handled the children, framed as motherly worry. Each word was a drop of ink bleeding across the page of Michael's mind, slowly changing how he perceived the woman he was falling for. But Willow quickly realized that Jacinda was not an easy obstacle. She did not scare easily, did not falter under pressure, did not crumble the way Willow expected her to. Instead, Jacinda remained steady, gentle, and particularly dangerous in the way she bonded with Wiley. She could kneel beside him, speak his language, join his world without forcing her way into it. That was what terrified Willow the most. Jacinda wasn't trying to win Wiley over, she simply did. And Michael noticed. He admired the patience, the warmth, the quiet steadiness she brought into the household. For Willow, every moment Jacinda spent with Wiley felt like an intrusion into sacred territory. Every laugh they shared was a reminder of the months she herself had been absent. Every soft gesture, every familiar nickname, carved deeper into the fear that Willow had failed as a mother and that Jacinda might succeed where she had fallen apart. That fear, once ignited, grew into a blazing force that refused to be contained. When her attempts to undermine their relationship showed little effect, Willow began shifting toward a more dangerous philosophy. She started to see Jacinda's removal not as an act of jealousy, but as a necessary adjustment, a correction to protect Michael from further losses. Because in her eyes, Michael was losing far more than he realized. His authority over Wiley was slipping away each time Jacinda offered a comforting hand. His decision-making power weakened as he defended her, choosing her word over the warning signs Willow insisted existed. Even his emotional independence deteriorated as Jacinda became a new anchor in his life. In Willow's distorted lens, Jacinda wasn't just damaging Michael's relationship with his children, she was stripping him of his rights, his influence, his ability to shape the family's future. Willow convinced herself that every day Jacinda remained, Michael lost another piece of himself, another fragment of what once made him strong. And worse, he didn't see it happening. The more blinded he became by Jacinda's presence, the more Willow believed she was the only one capable of restoring his balance. She saw herself as the guardian of his legacy, the keeper of his rights, even if Michael did not ask for such protection. This illusion of purpose made Willow bolder. She no longer viewed her interference as sabotage, but as a necessary intervention. She told herself that she was acting from love and loyalty, not possession or bitterness. Yet deep beneath her rationalizations, a darker truth pulsed. Willow could not tolerate being replaced neither as a mother, nor as the woman who once stood at Michael's side. And once a fear becomes a wound, it only takes one touch for it to bleed into violence. Willow's thoughts soon turned toward decisive solutions. If Michael refused to see Jacinda's true nature, Willow could reveal it for him. If the relationship would not crumble on its own, she could accelerate its collapse. But if even that failed, if Jacinda remained, if Michael continued to defend her, then Willow would have no choice but to consider the unthinkable. She began examining Jacinda's vulnerabilities, analyzing her routines, studying her medical records and habits. Willow was meticulous, methodical, almost unnervingly calm. She had done this before. She knew how to make an act of destruction appear accidental. Her mind returned repeatedly to the syringe she had used on Drew, how easy it had been. The decision, though horrifying in hindsight, had felt shockingly natural in the moment. There had been no tremor in her hands, no shaking breath, no tearful hesitation. If anything, she remembered feeling a strange clarity, a quiet conviction that she was doing exactly what she must. That memory lingered now, feeding her confidence. If she could bring down Drew without a trace of guilt, what was stopping her from eliminating Jacinda? But Willow's descent was not simply about eliminating a rival. It was about reversing what she saw as a chain of injustices. In her mind, Michael was losing everything, losing power in the household, losing control over his children's future, losing autonomy, losing status. Willow convinced herself that Jacinda's presence accelerated all these losses, and that the only way to restore what Michael was losing was to remove the source of the damage. His rights, his influence, his ability to protect his children. She believed all of it was slipping away, and the responsibility to fix it fell squarely on her shoulders. The deeper Willow sank, the more she embraced these distortions as truth. She began crafting a narrative in which she was the hero, one who would reclaim Michael's rights, rebuild the family's foundation, protect their fragile world from being rewritten by an outsider. The tragedy was that Willow did not see how far she had drifted from reality. She no longer recognized that the adjustments she spoke of were merely disguises for manipulation, cruelty, and irreversible harm. In the quietest hours of night, Willow envisioned a future where Jacinda was gone, where Michael, shaken, heartbroken, vulnerable, turned back toward her for comfort. She imagined Wiley reaching for her again, Amelia resting in her arms, the family restored to its rightful order. In those fantasies, Willow saw herself as the force that rescued them all from chaos. She never allowed herself to acknowledge that she was, in truth, the architect of that chaos. What Willow refused to see was that each step she took toward destroying Jacinda also destroyed the version of herself she once believed she was. Every thought of sabotage, every plan for separation, every dark scenario she engineered pulled her further away from the light she had fought for. The more she tried to preserve Michael's rights and reclaim what she thought he was losing, the more she lost her own humanity. And yet, the darkness inside her no longer frightened her. It guided her, empowered her, whispered to her that she alone could fix everything, even if fixing everything meant breaking someone else completely. The story now shifts toward a new and unsettling adjustment, one that does not come from Willow, but from Michael himself. As Willow's dark intentions grow sharper, a parallel change is unfolding in Michael. A change no one, not even Willow, expected. What began as confusion and guilt inside him is slowly evolving into a fierce instinct to protect Jacinda. It is one of the newest shifts in the emotional landscape, and it carries the weight of an approaching storm. Michael has always been a man who tries to do the right thing, but the relentless pressure surrounding the custody battle and Jacinda's involvement in his life forces him into a corner where he must finally choose a side. And he does. He chooses Jacinda, not because she is perfect, but because he sees the truth beneath her flaws. He sees her effort, her gentleness with Wiley, her quiet determination to earn the children's trust without forcing herself into a motherly role. But more importantly, Michael recognizes something that Willow refuses to see. Jacinda has become a stabilizing presence for him and for Wiley and Amelia as well. This marks the beginning of a profound shift. One of the biggest emotional adjustments lies in the realization that Michael is no longer willing to let Willow dictate the narrative of who belongs in their family. He begins to understand that Willow's behavior is not simply rooted in insecurity. It has grown unpredictable, obsessive, and potentially dangerous. And for the first time, Michael is prepared to act. Michael steps into a defensive position, quietly but firmly aligning himself with Jacinda. This is not just a romantic decision, it is a protective one. He senses a new intensity in Willow's actions, a restless edge she tries and fails to conceal. He sees how she manipulates conversations, how she shifts blame, how she twists her concerns into accusations. Slowly, Michael starts to suspect that Willow's attempts to adjust things might not end with words. He does not yet know the depth of her darkness, but instinct tells him something is badly wrong. And then comes the sharpest twist, the change no one imagined Michael would ever accept. In a moment of painful clarity, Michael admits something unthinkable. Willow may win custody of Wiley and Amelia. This admission becomes one of the most shocking developments yet. It is not a surrender, it is a recognition of the legal reality forming around him. With his credibility damaged in court, with Jacinda's past being used as ammunition, and with Alexis exposing flaws in Michael's alibi, he realizes that the court may view Willow as the more stable parent. As much as he wants to fight, he sees the tide turning, and that realization shakes him to the core. Michael understands that if Willow regains custody, Jacinda will be the first person she targets, not legally, but emotionally, psychologically, perhaps even physically. He does not know Willow's plans, but he recognizes the hostility in her eyes, the intensity of her obsession, and the cold calculation behind her words. He can no longer dismiss those signs as grief or fear. He now sees them as warnings. Thus, a new arc begins, one that intertwines Michael's fear, Jacinda's vulnerability, and Willow's accelerating descent. Michael's protective instinct surges. If he loses the children, if he loses the legal ground, then at the very least, he cannot lose Jacinda. She becomes his last pillar of stability, the one person he feels compelled to shield from Willow's escalating behavior. Michael begins making decisions quietly, meeting with attorneys, documenting interactions, watching Willow more closely than ever, trying to anticipate her next move. Each decision marks a deeper shift in the storyline. Willow believes she is tightening her grip, adjusting the situation to reclaim control. But she doesn't realize that her behavior is creating the exact opposite effect. She is pushing Michael into Jacinda's arms, pushing him to fight back, pushing him to expose her. And Michael's acceptance that Willow may win custody becomes the emotional earthquake that sets everything else into motion. It is a shock not because Michael gives up, but because of the implications that follow. If Willow gains custody, she gains power. If she gains power, Jacinda becomes vulnerable. If Jacinda becomes vulnerable, Willow sees an open path to eliminate her. And Michael understands this in a way he cannot yet articulate. His instinct warns him, protecting Jacinda means protecting her not only from legal outcomes, but from Willow herself. This new shift becomes the engine of a larger crisis brewing beneath the surface. Willow's adjustments, her dark plans, her tightening control, they all collide with Michael's newfound determination to protect the woman he cares about. The result is a growing fracture, a tension with the potential to explode into something irreversible. And when Michael finally realizes that Jacinda's safety could depend on him alone, the entire narrative pivots. The man who once tried to mediate peace now prepares for confrontation. The man who once tried to understand Willow now starts to fear her. And the man who once stood torn between guilt and loyalty now stands determined to act. The shock is not only that Willow may gain custody. The true shock is that Michael now knows if she does, someone he loves might not survive what comes next.